Barbados, get up.
Good morning, Barbados, good morning to you. Good morning, 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 morning. Good morning to you. Good morning, Barbados, good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning, morning, Barbados, good morning. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Morning to you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today, Friday, January the 21st, 2022, Errol Barrow Day, a public holiday in Barbados. Indeed, one day of the year when we take time as a nation to celebrate the contribution of one of our national heroes, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, who was born on this day, January the 21st, 1920. That means he would have been 102 years old today, and what a contribution he has made indeed. All throughout this show, we'll be taking a look at his life, his times, and that contribution as well. Perhaps we should start at the beginning by taking a look at the man and his beginnings.
The man destined to mold the modern sovereign state of Barbados was born in the parish of St. Lucie on January the 21st, 1920, the third of 5 children and the second son of outspoken Anglican cleric, the Reverend Grant Barrow, and his wife, Ruth O'Neill. In 1931, at the age of 11, Errol Barrow won a scholarship to Combermere School. 3 years later, a second scholarship took him to Harrison College. And in an early display of bold independence, Barrow set aside his studies to the alarm of his family and joined the Royal Air Force. From the moment he entered Parliament, Barrow demonstrated that his would be a name of note in Barbadian politics. His maiden speech on an insurance bill drew prolonged applause from both sides of the chamber, that he would be neither silent nor submissive on matters about which he felt strongly. Barrow and his cabinet embarked on a program of revolutionary change in Barbados. Among the most fundamental was the abolition of fees in government secondary schools. It reflected Errol Barrow's investment in the young and his conviction that education and liberty are inseparable. From agriculture to trade, from aviation to health, Barrow challenged Barbadians to new modes of thinking, relentlessly urging them on to new images of themselves. Independence, he insisted, must first be secured in the mind.
I would say his number one accomplishment was really the managing the transition from dependency to independence.
He had presided over what was without question the most significant period in the life of modern Barbados. He had engineered a second social revolution among Barbadians. Errol Barrow would spend the next 10 years recharging his batteries and indulging his private passions of sailing and cooking, but never once losing touch with the streets of the people of Barbados.
Errol Barrow was a colossus in the true sense of the word, but he was also a very gentle human being who understood right from wrong in a very strong way.
Errol Barrow was committed to the man in the street, his lifestyle. But Errol never had any outriders. As a matter of fact, I was scared to drive with Errol Barrow because he's so deep in thought he'd go through a red light.
Errol Barrow would again become Prime Minister of Barbados in 1986. Now the elder statesman of the Caribbean community, he used what would be his last appearance before them as an opportunity to remind his colleagues of their unfinished mission.
There are many critical problems on our agenda. There will be many different, even conflicting views. We have a long experience in surviving such differences. and we will survive them again.
Errol Barrow offered Barbadians a new image of themselves. His enduring achievement is that he banished from the minds of Barbadians and their neighbors in the region the self-defeating notion that a small island state had no place in the larger councils of the world. He inspired in Barbadians a sense of place, not bounded by geography, but one which existed everywhere a Barbadian chose to go.
So definitely we'll be leaning a lot on the rich archival material we have here at the CBC. We'll take a break right here. When we come back, much more on this Errol Barrow Day.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Thank you so much for staying with us on this special edition of Morning Barbados today, January the 21st, 2022, Errol Barrow Day. And if you're old enough to have been around at the Garrison Savannah, you may recall on the stroke of midnight, 1966, when the flag, the Union Jack, was lowered, the Barbados flag was raised for the first time, the sounds and strains of the Barbados national anthem was played, the joy, the jubilation, and so much more. But in all of that, Barbados became an independent state, cutting ties with the United Kingdom, with which it had spent some relationship over 300 years. It also, Barbados signaled then, became the fourth independent CARICOM state. Yes, following on the heels of Jamaica and Trinidad in 1962 and Guyana in 1966. And Errol Barrow became our first Prime Minister and Sir John Stowe our first Governor General.
On the culminating occasion of the flag-raising ceremony at midnight, there was a display that was moving in its beauty and orderliness. Taking part were the Barbados Landship, the Cadet Corps, the Regiment, the Royal Barbados Police, and detachments of the British and Canadian navies.
And so here's his speech when he was appointed as Prime Minister of Barbados.
I, Errol Walton Barrow, being appointed Prime Minister, do swear that I will, to the best of my judgment, at all times when so required, freely give my counsel and advice to the Governor-General or any other person for the time being lawfully performing the functions of that office, for the good management of the public affairs of Barbados.
What a signal moment indeed in life and times of the right excellent Errol Walton Barrow. But one of the things, momentous occasions I do recall is that day when in Independence Square there was the unveiling of that huge statue to his honor. I'm sure many of you do take the time from time to time to head downtown to stand in the shadow of this colossal, this Barbadian colossal indeed. If you do recall, it was on Sunday, January the 21st, 2007. I was there, and it was an impressive 9-foot tall bronze statue, I want to get it right, which weighs approximately 2,000 pounds. Majestic in appearance, it stands commandingly at the southern end of Independence Square in the capital city of Bridgetown, where it overshadows an area that was once one of Barrow's favorite political platforms.
Looking towards the revered Parliament where his policies were formally debated before being enacted.
Ladies and gentlemen, a statue in the likeness of the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, national hero of Barbados and the father of independence.
I'm sure many of you remember that day. It was quite an occasion indeed. We're going to take a break right here. We'll come right back with more on this special edition of Morning Barbados on Errol Barrow Day. The name Barrow in the history of Barbados stands tall. There are many who have contributed and continue to contribute to the fabric of the society in which we operate. And so when you say Barrow and Errol Barrow, you have to say Dame Anita Barrow as well. The late Dame Anita Barrow, Her Excellency, former Governor General of Barbados, take some time now from this archival footage to share her memories of her brother, then the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow. She mentions what it was like to grow up with the man.
I hesitate and stop, because when you were growing up, you were not growing up with Errol Barrow as you knew him. You had a younger brother growing up with you. Actually, Errol, at 10 years old, our mother had to go to the United States, where my father then was. Errol was the fourth of the 5 children. My sister Sybil the 5th. Sybil went with mother, and Errol was left at home in Barbados, and I then was the older sister, some 14 years, so 4 years older. And I think that colored our relationship, because I had a sense of responsibility for him. He was like any other small boy, always having an accident. If he hadn't cut his face, he had chopped his knee, he had fallen down. He was always very sure of himself, I would say. Played with all the other boys of the neighborhood. In fact, there was a group of them, Fred Cozier, who later became his permanent secretary, the Inneses, Alan and George Louis Innes, who was our harbor master subsequently, and they were a gang of boys like there are anywhere else. We were relative. First he was at Wesley Hall, where all the boys in the family had been. That was not only a tradition, but it had its own discipline, and I think was very good for them. He was a choir boy at St. Michael's Cathedral with Gerald Hudson. He was a scout, because in the family there'd been the tradition of scouting, as Sir Hugh's father and uncle had started it here. Mischievous, very strong-willed. If he decided to do something, he was doing it. He was also, I think, more clear about what he wanted to do than we realized. But you didn't examine things. When people ask you questions like that, it looks as if you were having the person under a microscope and saying, well, now what is he going to be? It wasn't like that at all. He had always a gang of friends. Our backyard was always full of, in those days, you played backyard cricket. And since we lived very close to Harrison College, it was a logical stopover, and we lived opposite the park, and that was the place to which we went after school to play. That was our playground. The thing was that in those days, usually the eldest girl was held responsible for not only getting the family into the park, but back out. And Rita Cozier, now Springer, each of us were the seniors in a family of 5. We were always instructed to be home by 6 o'clock. Invariably, everybody played as strong or went their ways. Invariably, at 5 minutes to 6, when we could find the other siblings, with me, it was Ina, the sister, Sybil when she was here. My big brother Graham was a bit older. You could never find Errol and Fred. They always managed to disappear at the appropriate time. So when we got home, we were the ones punished for their being late. And you know, we didn't love that very much.
I can imagine.
He also, so as I say, he seemed to aggregate friends. And what was the statement that my sister telling one of my aunts made about him? Because you could never be sure who his friends were. He was not traditional. He might be his classmate, might be somebody he met down the road, but he was always sure to be with someone around. We started, when we were a little older, a debating society which we very loftily called Shakespeare Debating Society. Charles Springer can tell you more about that. He was, again, as you know, a cousin. And they used to meet at our home, alternate homes. And there's no doubt that he was always the one in for the debate. In those days, we didn't have to talk about women's equality. We girls held our own with the boys in debating and in doing anything else that we wished to do. We also had the fun times in the holidays, again, of the families, the Calendars, Springers, Barrows, Coziers, and Gittinses, as Lady Springer's family. We would go on expeditions on our feet, walking to what was Freshwater, now Paradise Beach Hotel. You left at 5 in the morning, you took all your supplies for the day. This is when we were teenagers and older. And the boys were along with you just as much. You didn't go off your separate ways. You could be sure that when you got to the beach, however, and it was time to go, that at round-up time you had a really difficulty in finding them. And there was always an argument as to why they were not there. You know, it was not a simple, I'm sorry, not that at all. We grew, I think, our relationship as brothers and sisters of necessity. We were all very different personalities. And so when anybody tells you, you know, it was all love and dove and honey, don't believe it. You would have your discussions. We honed our own skills, I think, because as a family and as a group of friends, we all love to talk and we all like to debate. And you can be sure that he was a master when it came to not only being provocative, but holding his own. One of the things he developed early, I don't think he had a love for cooking, but he and another sister liked their own culinary art better than they liked that prepared. As the eldest, are responsible for housekeeping, and he says that in his book. You got to a stage where something was put on the table and they didn't like it, then I took the decision, you go into the kitchen and you cook your own. And that was no challenge for them. We were not in the days of gas stoves, but we did have oil stoves. And they always knew what they wanted, and they did it together or separately. Now, she's the other sister, Mrs. Como, who's also quite close to him. She lives here, too, in Doverwood. She would have her own ideas as to what he was growing up. Now, when he went away, it was the year that he got the Barbados scholarship for Codgington. I was already in training in the hospital, Queen Elizabeth. Sybil, my sister, you see by these pictures, she was here, and it was the year that our mother died. And we expected that he would have been going up to Codgington in the new term. Instead of that, I always remember his bags being ready for Codgington and coming in and his saying to me, oh no, I am going off to the Air Force. And as you know, he went in the first 12 who went. And the pictures, which someone asked if he had any early pictures, these actually were taken on the eve of his departure. The album is falling apart because it's traveled all over the world. It's the only time I've ever put pictures in an album.
What were your feelings when he went off to the RAF instead of going up to Codrington?
I think, I've tried to think about that. Well, I was surprised to begin with, especially as you couldn't be told exactly when they were leaving. You knew that he had joined up, and as soon as he was accepted, he let us know. There was a cousin, Gordon Barrow, who also went, who has since died. A surprise in a way, but I don't know. As a family, we were very accepting of each other's decisions, you know. It seemed, because of our whole tradition in Barbados at this time, after all, here you have an opportunity for higher education, and you're throwing it up, and you say you're going off to the war, because capital letters, the war. Yeah, the war. On the other hand, there was a strange sort of patriotism that people, I don't know if you'd say it was glamorous, but there was excitement about the fact that youngsters were going. It never entered my head, I think, even at that time, that he might not come back, because the war was still far away. It was when we got all the U-boats, which were sunk in there. You know, there was ships sunk in the harbor. And as a nurse, I saw the results of the burns of the survivors. I really realized some of the impact of what war really was, you know. But I don't remember any particular feeling of disappointment or why he went. I knew if he wanted to do it, he was going to do it. I mean, there was no discussion coming and saying, do you think I should go to the war? He was going to the war, he enlisted, he went.
He was quite a sportsman. He was a marksman, he was a sailor, he was a pilot. I understand he played cricket very well. That's where his nickname
started with the backyard cricket. He was an authority on cricket. Although he was a cricketer, was a different thing altogether.
What were some of his hobbies?
Languages. He liked languages. He read extensively. And I don't think it's, certainly when he was older and you appreciate a person's sort of
skills,
ability and his skills, he had also photography. He had some of the best, maybe Mr. Bruce others knew. He was very interested in photography, had some very good cameras, and he would take pictures. I don't know what has happened to his collection, maybe his daughter knows. He was also interested in things like the collection of glass and china. I remember we have a story in the family of his returning. I was in England when they were coming back home, and he had a few precious pieces of that crystal, you know, and these were packed in a leather suitcase, and they were bringing back a small baby. And the friend who was seeing them off tells the story of the family having to go in 2 taxis, and Errol took off in the first one with a lot of luggage and so on, and the precious crystal was in his hand. She looked out of the window to see the baby in the pram in the backyard in time to yell, "Look, you've left Leslie behind." So, I mean, there were things that were paramount in his mind. He decided that was mother's responsibility. He was taking care of the crystal. He liked things of that kind. He never made a fetish of it. He never spent the money on it that he didn't have, but things that were like that he enjoyed. He liked good plays. He never was a TV addict, never was, with due deference to CBC in the sense of watching any and everything. But reading had been part of our life as children. We grew up with books because of our Uncle Duncan and others, and we were among the first. I'm sure if you look in the children's library, I remember the Saturday open, because we were all marched down to join the library, and your biggest punishment at a weekend was if you didn't finish your chores, you couldn't go to the library, and Saturday morning library was something you looked forward to. You didn't get a chance to talk in the library, so you didn't go to gossip. You went and you were allowed to read and get the books you wanted, and that was something we all grew up with. And I think in many ways that encouraged his liking for reading.
In his earlier days, did he ever mention who were any of his role models, people that he looked up to and admired?
No, we didn't talk of role models in those days, but you knew there were people that you respected and you liked, and there was no doubt that our Uncle Duncan had a great deal of influence. He was almost his father of his own family, and I think Errol certainly had a great attachment to him because of the years of his life that he influenced so much. And if you talk about a role model, and then his older cousins, the 3 Springers, because they were like elder brothers in our household. And I think that Sir Hugh and certainly his brother Chris and Charles, they all had an influence on him in different ways. And certainly when it comes to the political field and so on, I would think that looking at what had gone before, with both Uncle Duncan and Hugh, would have had an influence on him. But you didn't discuss, people tell you today, so-and-so is my role model. I knew the teachers that perhaps the role model was you wished to be like them, and therefore you did certain things. For me, it was people like Lady Adams and Nella Tate, who were my early teachers and always gave you a feeling that you wanted to do things the way they expected of you. But to definitely call it a role model, you know, we didn't put on the labels, not then.
You've both gone on in your respective fields. Certainly to eclipse anything you may ever have imagined when you were growing up. Would you say that you've had a lot of influence on him, or that he had a lot of influence on you?
No, we are very individualistic as a family of 5, and perhaps people don't realize we each did things. That's why I said call my sister in our own way. The influence was that we always kept contact. All during the war, I had an important thing was to write on Sunday nights. We were brought up in the tradition of writing letters to our mothers away and so on. And when he was away, one of the things I was sure to do was to write. Sometimes he didn't know whether they got letters or not. He kept up the contact. He came to see me when I was at university in Toronto on one of his furloughs when he was flying the Murmas route. So then when I went to Edinburgh to study, I went through London, he was there. That was my first visit to London. And we kept each other informed, but there was never a thing of you influenced my career. In fact, on one occasion when in New York, 3 of us met, my sister Sybil, the younger one, he was down from a leave and I was in Toronto, and we all went to our aunt in New York. And we were talking about Sybil's decision to become a pharmacist. And I was saying, with 6 years of pharmacy at Columbia, you could just as well do medicine. And she just said, I want to do pharmacy. And then she turned and said something else. And he said, oh, well, we all take our punishment differently. So in other words, we all made our decisions, as I did when I went into nursing, as she did, his going to the Air Force. I think perhaps there was an expectation that you had to do something with your life. Certainly our mother always said, whatever you start, you have to finish. And that may have been a common denominator. And I think we were always proud of each other, all of us across the roads, because we were all of us doing things differently. And for the years, 15 years he was here, none of us worked in Barbados. And he was always very proud that no one could accuse him of nepotism. And we still all managed to work fairly successfully where we were.
What were the things you liked most about him? I know, having brothers myself, I know there's some things you like about them.
You like to kill them occasionally. Yeah. Occasionally you'll be glad of having something in your hand. I think one of the things, as he grew older, things that people didn't always know, he was a very soft person underneath.
Really?
Oh, yes. He cared a lot about people. He would do unexpected things that you would find out. And I think you grew to appreciate he had a steel in him when it came to certain decisions. But I don't think there's anyone who had a genuine case who appealed to him that he didn't try to respond. And I knew this when he would come into me and say, you have so-and-so, meaning you have more than you need this, or well, somebody needs it. It doesn't say who does it, takes it, it goes off with it. Fine. And we got to that understanding. He was intensely loyal to his friends, sometimes to a fault. If you were his friend, you were his friend. And don't say anything about his friends. He knew, and that was that. So you didn't say even some things you would like to say. I think in hindsight, that kind of loyalty also begets a certain amount of loyalty. He was intolerant of some things, there's no doubt about it. Some things he did not suffer gladly, and he told you so. A form of honesty that some people can appreciate and others can't, you know. And certainly where Barbados was concerned, Barbados came first, where you don't try to put anything ahead of Barbados. I remember that in Britain, they were lucky, he and his wife, in having a flat with more space than most students had. And it was a foregathering place for the West Indians of that day. You had Michael Manley, Forbes Burnham, people like Dudley Thompson, and they were all studying there. Cozy Harris, Telford Georges, Eugenia Charles, who actually lived with them. And they would be discussing the future of the Caribbean. Federation to them was a must and couldn't come. And these were in their 20s, and they had a commitment which was genuine. I think he carried that commitment over, and I know he did, because the CARIFTA, the free trade, was I was working and living in Antigua with World Health at the time, and that was a way of trying to get the Caribbean together. When the Federation came about, and I came through Barbados to go to it, I was then working in Jamaica. I knew the intense joy it was to many of those students who had seen it and were now taking their part in the countries of their birth. And I think that the difficulty many of them faced was how you adjusted to the post-Federation era without giving up the hope of a closer union within the Caribbean. In the years before I went to Geneva in '70, one of the big joys was, although I worked first in Jamaica and then throughout the Caribbean with World Health, was being able to come in and out of Barbados and have opportunities for long adult talks with him that all the years of being in other places you really didn't have, and really looking at real sacrifices that had to be made if you were going to be a leader in the particular era that was emerging. And yet it was a privileged time. I certainly wouldn't like to have been born in any other time of West Indian history. I think that we had unprecedented opportunities then, and we had people ready. And that was the thing that kept driving him, because there were the younger ones like himself, and there were some of the older ones who could see that this was the time to move ahead. He had that advantage over his uncle and his forebears.
Barbadians often refer to Errol Barrow as the father of independence, but would you say that he was a family man?
For the total family, yes, he was very much. He liked the family getting together. Every Christmas night, he always had a family dinner. For him, the family was not just the immediate nuclear family, but the extension of aunts and cousins, and the older members of the family, two of our aunts particularly, he was always very caring about. An aunt who was really his godmother, Mrs. Claremont, Margaret Walker's mother. I mean, she was almost a surrogate mother. Our Aunt Flo, who was Hugh Springer's mother, and Aunt Klein, who was our younger uncle's brother, Griselda's mother. He had an attachment to the wider family, which he didn't always have time to pursue. But he would make opportunities, and certainly when I came in, and when Sybil, my sister, came home and others, he always made occasions for family gatherings. I think, in a way, the whole public of Barbados became his wider family in more ways than one, which can be hard on your nuclear family, because you often get almost neglected for the wider things, and it's very hard for political figures that they know only too well to be able to maintain, one, the privacy of a real family life, because you're to everybody's, and to be able to indulge some of the real things of nuclear families. But from the white family point of view, yes, I think he had a strong sense of family.
I understand that he was an excellent cook, and together with another gentleman, he wrote the cookbook, Privileged Cooking in the Caribbean. What kind of cook was he?
Well, he needed several sous chefs because he enjoyed cooking. He did not like cooking in small quantities. So whenever he cooked, you know, he had to get a few people together, either before or after, to enjoy the meal. There is one tale told by one of his former ministers that when they held the cabinet meetings at Culloden Farm, about 11:30, he disappeared to go and make sure that the particular dish he was interested in was being prepared correctly. Certainly as a family, he never lost an opportunity. When I came in after my various travels, and he had become very interested in Chinese cooking. He had this very good friend in Trinidad, Dr. Ken Lee, and it was rather sad. It had taken about 10 years to prepare and edit and polish the book for publication, and it came out within 2 months of the death of them both, because Dr. Lee, who was not even ill, the month before Errol died, became ill and died just 2 months after. But I always told my friends, anytime he offered to cook, the kitchen had to be his. Do not get into it with him. But there was nothing left untouched by the time he was through. And his slogan was, you know, that if you cooked, you didn't clean. So you be prepared to clean up. He didn't want sous chefs to help with preparation. He's doing that. But help you when that's over. Anything within sight and everything had been used. And he really had perfected a number of recipes. He could cook Bajan things, but he really got really interested, and the cookbook would tell you mainly on Chinese. He'd write and say to me, and I sent him, but the cookbook was already, send your moussaka recipe, or send the recipe I had with you. Well, you know, I am a Bajan kind of cook. Don't ask me how many teaspoonsfuls of anything. I like to cook, but I put in as I go along. So my recipes never come out the same way twice. Everybody says they're edible, however. But he learned that you had to be precise when you did the recipes. I think he would have been very pleased with the book. Only yesterday a house guest was telling me, who lives in England, how much she enjoyed using it, because he gives you alternatives. And of course, if you're with him in foreign capitals, one of the first places he found was where they sold the various spices and things, which you would then bring back, you know, to use with his cooking.
When you think about him, when he comes to mind, how do you remember him? What are your most cherished memories of him?
I would say that one of the things I cherish most now, because of the kind of peripatetic existence in and out, were two events in 86 and 87. 86, the Christmas, he came up to New York when I had been just appointed ambassador, and spent very quietly with my sister, my aunt, who was nearly 90 at the time, and we had a very quiet and very enjoyable Christmas. He wasn't wishing partying or big Christmas dinners or anything. So we had a chance to talk. I mean, he even went out and bought as a Christmas gift a TV, because the only one in the house you had to go upstairs to. And he said, well, we can look at it if we have it in a more accessible place. And then the weekend before he died, when the Barbadian community were celebrating the first year of the parties going back into power, they had a very big celebration in New York. And he came up for that for a long weekend. I have never seen him in a better mood and more full of stories. We had a lot of time together. Apart from the big dance, which we have some good pictures, we didn't do very much, but just talk. And I was saying to a friend on the day they were leaving, well, I have got stories that I never even knew. They were related to family and to friends. He even brought us some pictures he'd taken of each of the houses where we'd been born, including Sybil's birthplace in St. Croix. And then we left at the same time. I was going to Mongolia to a UNESCO meeting, and he was coming back to Barbados. And he said, as he was leaving, but I always say nobody goes to Outer Mongolia, and you're going to Outer Mongolia, you know, that sort of very jovial. Yeah. And then they came back on the Monday morning, and Mr. Glasgow Consul told me he'd been trying to reach me. The very day of his death, we had a very long conversation. The first time I'd spoken to him in his office in the over year that I'd been in things. So when you say of cherished memories, I think some of them travels, like we were together at Expo 67, when you saw him in an official life. When I stayed with him and I lived at Culloden Farm, I would often, to talk to him, you had to get up early in the morning. And those days, the pot was outside the Hilton, you know, outside, yeah. And I would take off and go early. And I always remember coming back. Nobody knew me in those days, and I'd sit there listening to the opposition and the government. You remember how it used to happen? Yeah. You wouldn't remember, you're too young, Mr. Brewster might, on each side. And I would come back and say to him, you know, so-and-so is happening. All the people are saying so-and-so. I said, he'd say, how do you know? I said, just go to the pot and listen to the people, you know. And there were things like that that you could share. I think also that the fact that you'd go to his house all the years he was in opposition, I would come in and he'd say, would you come? I was come for dinner this evening, and he would have collected the family that was here at the time, aunts, cousins, and he'd be there cooking up a breeze, as we say. And when it's finished, he sits down quietly. He's no longer interested in the food. He's fixed it, he's put it there. A side of him that people didn't always see. And then hear him in an argument with friends and others, going at it ham and tongs. But the minute he's finished the argument, there is no real animosity or acrimony attached to it.
Do you miss it?
Oh yes, of course, especially if I want to talk about something to somebody that I don't want anybody else to talk to. Oh yes, and we always had an arrangement, even when I was away. I knew that the only time to talk to him was early in the morning, whether you stayed in the house, whether you were overseas, and so we would do our calling and our talking very early. And you miss that kind of relationship very much.
Memories indeed, and good to hear the voice once again of our former Governor General, Her Excellency Dame Anita Barrow. We're taking a break again, and we're coming back with more on Morning Barbados.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
With all that we know of the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, we know he loved to sail, we know he loved to fly, we also know he loved to cook. And so there was a cookbook which captured all of those recipes that he crafted and created while in the kitchen down at Kampala there in Black Rock. Well, we had the chance, obviously, to have one of Barbados' best known chefs, Norma Jackman, prepare some of those dishes. So let's share what she's done from the cookbook, Privilege, Cooking in the Caribbean by Errol Walton Barrow.
Norma, what are you cooking today?
Well, I'm cooking from the book Privilege. And I'm cooking pigeon peas and chicken. The first thing I did was to put a quarter cup of corn oil with 2 teaspoonfuls of sugar. So we let the sugar brown.
So this is the old-fashioned way.
This is the old-fashioned way, and this is no, this is not boiled browning. This is the real
McCoy.
The real McCoy, because this is what my grandmother used to do, and as you know, as Mr. Barr would say, that this makes the meat a little more tender, and it makes it a little tender, and it gives a better flavor. So, as you know, I'm cooking from Mr. Barr's book, Privilege. Right. So this is how you do. You start like this, and then
you have to let it get very hot because there's a lot of steam.
You have to let it get very hot, and you have to let it get brown. If it's not brown, then it will be very sweet. So you have to know when to.
Yeah, so then this is just guesswork here. You just have
No,
to
no,
guess.
this is not guess. This is knowing.
Oh, okay.
So now we're going to put in the chicken.
So before you put the chicken in, what do you do with it?
Well, I marinated the chicken in black pepper and celery, vinegar, Barbados rum, and you put salt to taste.
You do that overnight?
You put it aside for about an hour or two, but I did it overnight because it would come out a little better. So what I'm doing now is I'm cooking the chicken, and when I'm finished with the chicken, I've already cooked the pigeon peas and put them aside. So I'll let you see what I'm doing. Are you interested in cooking? Do you like cooking also?
Especially if I'm cooking.
Well, I'm very interested in cooking.
I noticed when I came in the door that you have lots of cookbooks. I can see that cooking is a very big part of your life.
Very true. But I like cooking so that people would enjoy what I cook. Okay. So you have to let this brown, and you keep turning it over until it's browned and cooked.
And it doesn't take very long because already
it doesn't take very long. After that, you would cook for a few minutes. And while it's brown, it has like a honey color on it. And this is how you'll do it. I'll show you. And this will take about between 20 and 30 minutes before it's finished cooked. As you know, chicken cooks very quickly. Yeah. Once the chicken is young and succulent, it's usually cooked quick. So you'll do it like this. And then you have the peas. You put the remainder of whatever is left from the marinated chicken. You throw it into the peas.
And you just let that cook in its own juices. You don't add any other seasonings.
No, you don't add any at all. Yeah. So you let it cook in its own juices, and then what you'll do, we have the peas already prepared, and you'll put the peas in.
So what did you do with the peas? You just cook them?
I just cook them in salt and onion and put a little garlic in it, you know,
okay.
And then you'll put the peas.
Is it possible that if you wanted to do this recipe at any other time of the year, you could use a different kind of peas?
Well, you could cook the dry pigeon peas, or I would suggest that you can do it with red beans or white beans or any kind of beans that you can do it with, and this will be great. When it's finished boiling, you let it boil for about 20 minutes, and as it's finished, then you put in the corn starch. You have 2 teaspoonfuls of cornstarch and 2 tablespoonfuls of water. So you mix it together.
Is that better than when you use flour to thicken?
Yeah, I think cornstarch does a better job because if it has a lot of grease, it helps eliminate the grease also. Oh, okay. So you have to let it cook like this. And then you put in the cornstarch. And you let it cook. When it's finished cooking, you
Oh, that looks delicious.
We're starting to make a salad here. A very simple salad because, as you know, Mr. Barr was a very, very simple man. He never made a fuss with a lot of things. So we used Barbados, local Barbados tomatoes. You set it all around the plate. And then you...
What were some of his favorite dishes?
I would think that, to me, he liked chicken, green pigeon peas, but he liked pepper pot.
Yeah.
Pepper pot was one of his favorite things. And
Was he big on the traditional things like cuckoo and flying fish and
yes, he was. But he would come into your kitchen and tell you how to cook something. He would tell you not cooking it right. No, but he would tell you how to cook it. And this was his first love. He loved the kitchen. And you know, one of the things I've learned from him is that he entertained most of the people in his kitchen. If he was in his kitchen, he was cooking. Unless you were very, very formal, you would have to go in his living room. Otherwise, he'd cook you. You know, you're in his kitchen, and that's how he entertained his people. All right, and this is normal. Like if you had, suppose you were having you had a few guests, and you didn't have anything much to offer them. So you had a few white potatoes. Okay, you'll put a few white potatoes in the center. This is what you call a privilege, because you might not have a lot. There may be even carrots that are left over.
So you cook the carrots.
You cook the carrots, and then you
dice them.
And you dice
the white potatoes.
This is what you call the privilege, because you know you could have, even if you had some carrots and white potatoes at home, you could take it and turn it into a beautiful salad. There might have been carrots that you had left from the day before. You could turn it into a beautiful salad.
That's the thing about salads. You don't need to do a lot to have a really nice salad. And that looks very good. And the contrast in the colors is what
I would finish it this way by making a rose to put in the center of the salad.
For that, you need a very sharp knife.
Yeah, you need a very sharp knife. You
and
need
just the skin of the tomato.
It's just the skin of the tomato that you do to make the rose. So, you see, the presentation, for me, is always very important.
Because the food has to look appetizing. You want to eat it when you see it.
Thank you. And that's the way I think about food, that it must be something that you see that you would like. This is the way I make a rose from a tomato. From the skin of the tomato, you keep rolling and rolling and rolling. And then when you're finished, you put it together.
That's simple enough.
And that's the tomato rose. So that's the simple.
So that's the salad plate.
That's the simple. And this is the chicken.
It seems to be nearly done now.
It's almost finished.
And at this point, you still don't put in any extra seasonings.
No, you don't put. Just let it cook its own juice, because it has been marinated quite a while in its own garlic and pepper and everything. So it has a lot of.
One of the things about this book I've noticed in just browsing through it is the recipes seem to be so simple and so quick.
They're very simple. They are simple recipes for the people who, you know, privilege is to say, for poor people who didn't have anything and you have a privilege to eat certain things. This is what I believe. And I believe that this is such a privilege. You have some chicken, you have some pigeon peas, you throw it together, and you serve it with some white rice. I have two friends of mine who are here to have lunch with me. Would you like to join them?
It would be a pleasure.
Would you?
It would be a pleasure.
Thank you. This is the finished part we have just done from the Book of Privilege.
Chicken with pigeon peas. This looks absolutely delicious.
We're serving it with white rice, the salad, and some sorrel from the same book, Privilege, Mr. Barrow's book. I hope you'll enjoy it. Would you all like to go ahead and enjoy yourself?
Thank you. You at home must try this. I've tasted it before. It is lovely. Meanwhile, I'm going to enjoy myself here.
Well, you know you're a hero when someone captures everything about you in animation. And so we want to share with you now just a little bit of animation that tells of the achievements of this man, the right excellent Errol Walton Barrow, hero of Barbados.
Some say talk is cheap. Others say sticks and stones break bones, but words can never hurt. Not so in my case. By the end of my story, you'd see why I say not so. Can you imagine me, a man from a tiny 166 square mile island nation, just granted independence from the imperialist Great Britain, at the General Assembly of the United Nations, tell the superpowers we will be friends of all but satellites of none? Some hail me as the father of independence, others Dipper, but I am Errol Walton Barrow. Remember, we are talking about words. My father, Reverend Reginald Grant Barrow, had studied the Holy Ministry at Codrington College from 1909. This was a rare achievement since men of African descent in that profession were very uncommon. After completing study, he became curator at the St. Lucy's Parish Church. Early in 1920, the year I was born, he was relocated to St. Croix, where he continued to use the pulpit to challenge the scourge of racism. His refusal to be intimidated got him fired as priest, and he became a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the AME, founding a branch in St. Croix through which he continued to attack the overwhelming social injustice of that day. He also became editor of the Herald there, which, like the Barbados Herald, was radical in representing the working class. His words caught the attention of the local authorities and he was deported when I was merely 2 years old. He later became principal of the Allen School. My mother, the former Ruth Alberta O'Neill, was sister of Dr. Charles Duncan O'Neill, who influenced me greatly. According to my brother Reginald Graham Barrow, I got many ideas from O'Neill. This was a time when many Barbadians lived in political and economic misery. The only outlet was to migrate to Panama, Cuba, or America. Being part of the fortunate blacks of that day, with my uncle a doctor and father with status, was an asset. This afforded me a good primary and secondary education at Wesley Hall and Harrison College, which was really for children of the elite and the fortunate black working and middle class who won a scholarship. Winning an island scholarship in 1939 instead of going on to Codrington College, I opted to join the British Armed Forces. This experience would indeed help in preparing me for the leadership roles that would be thrust upon me later. The world was then in its second war. I joined the Royal Air Force and was appointed observer, navigator, leading aircraftsman, sergeant, pilot officer, and flying officer. My service was led to an appointment as personal navigator to the Air Chief Marshal, Sir Sholto Douglas, during the Allied occupation of Germany. Let me say here, this achievement of such high office and responsibility was rare for any person of African descent in any of the Allied nations' armed forces. This experience could have helped to make my mixing with people of different racial backgrounds easy. After the war, I was placed in a supervisory position in a colonial office. I finally graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics and industrial law from the University of London and was called to the English bar. In the Caribbean, a degree in law or medicine was considered the prerequisite for entry into political life, since these professions offered financial independence. My wife Carolyn and daughter Leslie returned to Barbados with me in 1950, and I started my practice as a barrister at law. It was then that Grantley Adams noticed that my leadership skills would greatly enhance his cause and political reform. after joining the Barbados Labour Party, the BLP. I contested a seat in the general elections of 1951 and became the senior member representing St. George. At that time, there was a double-member constituency system in which the person gaining the highest votes was senior and the runner-up was designated the junior member. There were 3 political parties: the Electors Association, the BLP, and the Congress Party. I still remember my first speech in the House of Assembly. We were debating a bill to establish third-party insurance. However, I would not be confined to that single matter under discussion, and I said, "There is another point which is not germane to the present issue, but at some very early date we shall have definitely to revise and amend the Separation and Maintenance Act 1950 and make its provisions more widely known to the community. However, I do not intend to dwell on that issue, but having a cursory glance at the present act, I say that there are certain things which need to be amended." Being trained under Professor Harold Lasky, it was rather difficult for the leadership of the BLP to keep me in check, and within a few years a rift developed. Myself and a few others, including Frank Walcott, were at loggerheads with Brantley Adams, the leader, over the pace of reform and direction of policy. In 1955, I told the House of Assembly, "I am going to make a very serious decision now, and because I regard this unemployment as the most pressing problem facing this island at the present, and in view of the fact that I am completely dissatisfied not only with the Honourable Minister of Labour, but with the whole attitude of ministers in this government, and their complete disregard of the suffering of the people and of the party. Because of that, I no longer want to be associated with them politically or otherwise." With this, I resigned from the BLP, and along with J. Cameron Tudor and others formed the Democratic Labour Party. That move would cost me my seat the following year, but I re-entered Parliament, winning a by-election in St. John in 1958, where I successfully and continually served until my death on June 1st, 1987. 1961 proved to be a success for my Democratic Labour Party, as we won the general election and I became Premier. It was during this term that I fought for the country's independence. I remember telling them it was best that Barbados be not found loitering on colonial premises after closing time. Independence was finally granted to us on November 30th, 1966, and I became the first Prime Minister. Under my leadership, Barbados would play a major role in Caribbean integration. One achievement was the formation of the Caribbean Free Trade Area, CARIFTA, in 1965, with Barbados, Antigua and Guyana being the first to sign. The others joined in 1968. CARIFTA was later expanded and reorganized as Caribbean Community and Common Market, CARICOM. Michael Manley, then Prime Minister, had this to say about me: "But this claim upon history will extend far beyond the boundaries of Barbados. He will take his place amongst the significant heroes of Caribbean history. When we are brought finally by circumstance to the point where the region which was foreseen by the deeper thinkers of the 30s and 40s, he will take his place as a major architect of the process." In the 10 years from 1966 to 1976, my efforts saw the introduction of a national insurance and social security scheme and school meals on an improved nutritional basis, improved health services, and the opening of the QEH hospital, accelerated industrial development, and considerable expansion of the tourist industry. That decade had seen the increase from a single to a multi-sector economy: agriculture, tourism, and manufacturing. In tribute, a senator who later rose to Deputy Prime Minister said of me, "He has now joined the ranks of those heroes fallen on the battlefield. He died not in retirement, but at the helm of this country." I think that this should be the lesson and instruction that we learn from his life. that we must press on toward that goal which we set ourselves. There are many landmarks that pay tribute to my memory. A memorial park in Wildy, the ABC Highway, which I share with JMGM Tom Adams and H. Gordon Cummings. On April 28, 2007, a full-length statue of me was unveiled in Independence Square. My birthday, January 21st, is also celebrated as a public holiday.
This is our special edition of Morning Barbados today on Errol Barrow Day, when we celebrate our national hero, the right excellent Errol Walton Barrow. We're coming back with more after this break.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
So good you could stay with us today for this special edition of Errol Barrow Day. Indeed, for Morning Barbados, thank you so much as always for keeping company with us. And for those of you across the world, as always, it's wonderful having your company. But did you know that there is a movie about Errol Barrow? Yes, there is. It's the Errol Barrow docudrama, Barrow, Freedom Fighter, which tells the story about the courage of one man who relentlessly preached a gospel of economic self-reliance and self-respect to the peoples of his native country, Barbados, and beyond. He defied the status quo, confronted racism and classism, fought colonial oppression, and selflessly led his people to political and economic freedom. So let's take a snippet now of that film.
West Indian ex-servicemen were given the opportunity to study in Britain, and Errol Barrow took advantage of this opportunity.
In 1947, Errol Barrow studied law and economics at the London School of Economics, known as the cradle of socialist politics.
At the London School of Economics in those days was a renowned professor, Harry Lasky, who's written many books, who's renowned for the vibrancy of his ideas. And those ideas were democratic socialist ideas. So Errol Barrow became a democratic socialist, both by tuition at the London School of Economics, but also his uncle, Dr. Charles Duncan O'Neill, in his day had been talking about free education, about school meals for children, and about a whole set of other forward-looking things that would have sounded revolutionary in his time.
Mr. Barrow's social origins played a significant part in his achievements, behavior, and self-confidence. Mr. Barrow had no personal concept of inferiority, and he was totally at ease with himself. Now, this self-confidence manifested itself in hobbies including sailing, horseback riding, and flying, among other things. Now, these were activities in which the average black Barbadian in that time could only dream of engaging. But none of these achievements made Errol see the average Barbadian as limited in their importance. He never used his social standing to oppress or to dominate. Rather, he fought for the betterment of the lives of all Barbadians.
Skipper, you there? Come in, man. Morning.
Jazz.
Hey.
Skipper. What are you doing about here so early?
I got a little trouble and I come for your advice.
Trouble. It's that young boy of yours again, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's he done now?
But you know he can't handle the liquor, and every time we drink you rum, he ready to fight with the first body that close to you.
You know, that boy needs some good licks, cause he backside, you know that, right? Okay, so, he's in jail now. What do you want me to do about it, huh? You know I can't interfere with police business. Besides, probably do you some good to cool out in Glenderry for a bit anyway. T?
Yes, thanks. I know you can't interfere, but I had to talk to somebody, and I know that you was the best buddy that would listen.
Charlie, you're gonna have to get you a lawyer. Now, I know this is money you ain't got. But I'm gonna write down a name here for you. This is a young fella that just called the bar looking to get your feet wet. You go see him and tell him I sent you. And when that young vagabond get out of jail, you bring him with me. All right? I'll set you straight with a good tongue lashing.
They call him a socialist Democrat, and that is what he was. His real goals in life was to empower those who did not have the same opportunity. He believed that all people are equal.
Well, thank you, Prime Minister, but I don't want to keep you back, but it's about that piece of land in St. Lucie that belonged to my father.
Right. Yeah, I got a lady here who's one of your clients, and she's saying she's not getting anywhere regarding a piece of land you got in Outland, St. Lucie.
Thank you for saying that.
Fred, yeah, I know you. You used to keep shop up at Cox Road before you moved down to St. David.
We have a boy and a girl at university. And as you know, in these times, you must have an education in order to get ahead. And while the government does, you know, pay the tuition, we still got to send them a little something from time to time. So we were hoping that you could find a little something for either of us to do.
Your constituency representative is Alan Hopkins, right?
Well, to tell you the truth, sir, we tried to get through to Mr. Hopkins several times.
And what happened?
But we can't get through.
Brad, give me Alan Hopkins on the phone, will you? What you need to understand is that Errol Barrow only speaks on a platform of city members who do their work. You got that? And I don't want to find no more people.
I was out in the back this morning, and I saw a nice breadfruit. And I said to myself, now that's just what Mr. Barr likes, a nice breadfruit. So I cut it just for you.
Very kind of you, Mrs. Linton. Very thoughtful. Thank you. Mrs. Barrow and I will enjoy this tonight with some friends who are coming for dinner. Breadfruit and dolphin. What could be sweeter, right?
He was a great entertainer. He loved cooking. He loved sharing. And it was an opportunity also to discuss issues.
When he was at school at London, he always used to complain that the English food didn't have any color, didn't have any taste, didn't have any this. So I suppose that motivated him to say, well, he's going to cook.
There was a celebration for Auntie Anita's 70th birthday, and Uncle Errol and I had to make buljol, saltfish buljol. Well, I really had to make it, if I recall. I was the one that Auntie Anita asked to make the buljol. I said, fine, I'll make it. Now, Trinidadians normally do not put cucumbers in buljol. Barbadians put cucumbers in buljol, more so than not. And I had done my buljol without cucumbers. And Uncle Errol came in, tasted it, and said, it must have cucumbers. And I said, but I am making a Trinidadian buljol. He said, no, buljol must have cucumbers. And he proceeded to start cutting up cucumbers. There was a buljol fight, a saltfish fight, about should it have cucumbers or shouldn't it? And in those days, of course, I figured I'm a big woman, so I could fight, and I could defend the territory. Needless to say, the buljol ended up with cucumbers.
The problem with Errol Barr and cooking food was that as he cooked, he ate. So on no occasion did I ever have a chance to eat with Errol Barr. I ate Errol Barr's food, but never ate with Errol Barr. Because by the time the food was ready to be presented, he was pretty well full.
Well, it showed up in later life, his paunch. Food didn't frighten him. And when food saw him, they say, oh, we're gone. He was a good eater.
He liked cola tonic. He drank cola tonic and beefeated gin a lot. And a particular Sunday, I was at his home, and he asked what I wanted to drink, and I said, well, you know, whatever you have. I said, I'm going to bring you a gin and cola tonic. He went back to his kitchen and discovered that there was no cola tonic in the house. 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, he said, have me excused. And he left the house in search of a bottle of cola tonic.
He would do a tremendous meal, but Uncle Errol was not cleaning up. And as much as we appreciated, he used every pot in sight, every spoon in sight, and he was obviously doing a variety and range of things, so he needed the entire kitchen, and whatever size the kitchen was, the entire kitchen was utilized.
Errol Barrow really liked shopping, I think, for two reasons. He was particular about the stuff he bought, but also it gave him an opportunity to mix with ordinary people at a level where they were comfortable, as against at a political meeting or in some formal structure. I think that meant a lot to him, seeing people where they were comfortable. On one occasion, I was shopping at Goddard's. I encountered him in the aisle.
Harold? Hey. What's that you got there?
And that is a pigtail skipper.
Pigtail? That has no miserable thing in no pigtail. Skin it back in your bucket. Ah, see that? Now that is a pigtail.
Nice, nice.
All right.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Good looking out.
Anytime.
So from then on, I knew how to select a pigtail for cooking.
Uncle Errol's love for cooking led him to co-write a cookbook, Privilege, with Dr. Kendall Lee, a dentist from Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Lee, like Uncle Errol, had a passion for cooking, and Privilege, their cookbook, includes recipes drawn from a wide range of cultures that make up the Caribbean region.
I had to type out all the recipes and everything for him, and I found them all so fascinating.
The very first recipe in the book was fish tahini, and that recipe I gave to him.
Mr. Barrow showed a dislike for extravagance in his private life, and true to form, he carried this trait into his public life.
I am a penniless politician, but I wish to remain an honest one. What does it profit a man to be the Prime Minister of Barbados or of the West Indies? What does it mean? It means nothing. If you lose your soul and achieve those objectives,
And so on January 21st, 2020, heading into St. Lucie as part of the celebrations for regathering, Prime Minister Mia Motley and Member of Parliament Peter Phillips unveiled a plaque in commemoration and recognition of the service of Barbados national hero, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, at his birthplace at the Garden St. Lucie. Take a look.
You have it?
And so today, or maybe tomorrow, sometime really soon, take that drive into the beautiful parish of St. Lucie and look for the plaque in memory there in the Garden St. Lucie. And when you do, take some time to remember the man or national hero, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow. That's it for us today. Thank you so much for staying with us for this special edition of Morning Barbados today on this national holiday, Errol Walton Barrow Day. My producer has been Nadia Foster, our technical director, Ruel Ford. Christopher Bleman has been at sound, and Tamisha Green at master control. I'm Pearson Bowen, wishing you all a very happy day today. Be safe. We look forward to seeing you again on Monday. Good morning.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Barbados, get up. Good morning.